Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
At the company party, a colleague got promoted, but not me. "You're useless, always causing problems," my boss sneered. I smirked. But the very next day, when he walked into the office, he was nearly floored by what he saw. They say everyone reaches a breaking point eventually. Mine came on a cold December evening during the corporate event celebrating the 20th anniversary of Build Invest. I had my outfit ready, of course, a dark blue dress bought specially for the occasion. After all, it's not every day one gets promoted to head of sales. I'd given 5 years to that company, 5 years of late nights, taking work home, missing loved ones' birthdays, and even postponing vacations for the sake of important deals. While coworkers hurried home, I stayed behind to finish quarterly reports. I trained new hires without a second thought. Marcos, our director, often patted me on the shoulder, saying, "Enrica is our saving grace. This company runs thanks to people like her." The Grand Imperial restaurant sparkled with festive lights. I walked in, adjusting my hair, styled in an elegant bun. David from finance winked at me, raising a glass of champagne. "Enrica, you're a star tonight. Have you practiced your acceptance speech yet?" I smiled, trying to hide my nerves. The promotion hadn't been officially announced, but everyone at the company knew the head of sales position had been vacant since Constancio Moro left. And who else but me deserved to take it? I'd brought in 3 major clients just this year. My performance numbers were consistently at least 30% above target. "We'll see," I replied modestly, accepting a glass from a waiter. The tables overflowed with appetizers, and champagne was flowing. Colleagues joked and laughed. My eyes kept drifting toward the stage, where the formal announcement was to be made. Marcos, a large man with a thick beard and perpetually messy hair, looked particularly stately in a black 3-piece suit. He caught my eye, nodded, and smiled. I got home in a daze. The door shut behind me with a dull thud, as if sealing off my old life. The apartment was dark and silent, with only a faint light shining from the kitchen. I must have forgotten to turn it off when I left for work that morning. Without taking off my shoes, I walked into the living room and collapsed into a chair. A stranger stared back at me from the mirror, mascara smudged, hair disheveled. 5 years. 5 years of crises, deadlines, midnight calls to clients in different time zones. "Enrica, we're counting on you." "Enrica, if not you, then who?" "Enrica, stay a couple extra hours, it's a matter of national importance." And this was the gratitude. "You're useless. All you bring is losses." My face burned as if I'd been slapped. That loathsome Marcos, always with his smirks and backpats, always promising the world, but when it came down to it. My phone rang. "Karen." "Enrica, how are you? I saw you left. That bastard's lost his mind. You practically rebuilt the sales department from scratch. And he..." I stayed silent, letting her anger wash over me. "You know what he did after you left," she went on. "He got totally plastered and started bragging about his big plans for Pilar. Said she's got the perfect body for closing business deals." "Karen," I said, my voice unnervingly calm, "I'm quitting." Silence. "Enrica, don't make any rash decisions. I get that it's painful, but..." "No. I've made up my mind. I carried that department on my back for 5 years, sacrificed my personal life and health. And what did I get? Useless. I've had enough. But where will you go? It's tough finding a job right now, you know that." I sighed. Suddenly, I remembered a conversation from 2 weeks ago. Antonio, a former coworker who had left Build Invest 3 years ago to start his own business, we'd run into each other at a cafe near the office. "Enrica, you need to leave that joke of a company," he told me. "With your experience and client base, you'd be a star anywhere. I'm building up my own firm and need a head of sales." I was thinking of Federico, but he moved to another city. "Think about it, okay?" At the time, I waved it off. How could I leave a stable job for a startup, especially with a promotion around the corner? Karen, I might actually have an option, I said. Remember Antonio, the one who started his own firm? Of course I do. Word is, he's doing pretty well. He offered me a position as head of sales. You see? Karen's voice brightened. They say when one door closes, another opens. Call him, right now. But I hesitated. No, there was one last thing I had to do. After hanging up, I turned on my computer, opened a text editor, and typed, resignation letter. My fingers flew over the keyboard, writing out the standard phrasing, I hereby request to resign from my position. I printed it out and signed it. In a plain envelope, the letter looked alien, almost menacing. Then I dialed Antonio's number. Despite the late hour, he picked up after the second ring. Enrica. What a surprise. Antonio, remember how you offered me a job? Of course. The offer still stands. Did something happen? I briefly told him about the evening's events. Antonio whistled. What a jerk. Then again, what else would you expect from Marcos? He was always a tyrant. Remember how he pushed me out just because I pointed out a mistake in his project? I do, I said, smiling at the memory of Antonio dramatically slamming the door behind him as he quit. Well then, Enrica, my offer is still on the table, head of sales, full autonomy, salary 30% higher than what you make now, plus a percentage from deals. I accept. The words escaped my lips easily, as if I had been waiting to say them for a long time. Excellent. Antonio's voice brimmed with genuine excitement. When can you start? Legally, I have to give 2 weeks' notice. Oh, forget the notice. Drop that resignation letter on the idiot's desk tomorrow and come straight to me. Remember the address? Mercury Tower. His impatience came through the phone, and it warmed me. Finally, someone actually wanted to work with me, someone who appreciated my experience. All right, Antonio. I'll quit tomorrow and head straight to you. Can't wait. And Enrica. His voice turned more serious, you're doing the right thing. Guys like Marcos never recognize real professionals. They only want yes men and, well, you know. I did. All too well. After the call, a wave of fatigue swept over me, but strangely, I felt light, as though a massive weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I lay in the dark, thinking about how I would walk into Marcos's office tomorrow, place the resignation letter on his desk, and say. What would I say? Dozens of biting phrases came to mind, scathing accusations about how he trampled my career, exploited my work while taking credit for it, how I had believed in team spirit all these years only to find out that youth and looks were all that mattered. In my imagination, I told him everything I had bottled up for 5 years. He turned pale, then red, stammered, and begged for forgiveness. But I knew I wouldn't say any of that. Better to let him realize his mistake on his own, when it's too late. When I'm already sitting in an office with a nameplate that reads Enrica Espiso, head of sales at a competing firm. The thought made me smile, no, smirk. See you on the market, Marcos, I whispered into the darkness. The unknown no longer scared me. On the contrary, it felt like a chance to start over, on my own terms, no more humiliation, no more unappreciated effort, no more false promises. My phone buzzed with a message, Karen. Enrica, are you okay? Want me to come over? All good. I'm quitting and joining Antonio. He just confirmed the offer. Bravo. I always knew you weren't the kind to put up with that crap. Tomorrow everyone will be shocked, especially that smug Pilar. I pictured how the news of my resignation would spread through the office tomorrow, how Marcos would be confused, then angry, how Pilar would panic when left alone with a department whose inner workings she didn't understand. Useless, am I? Causing losses? I smirked, remembering how 3 months ago I personally brought in a client with a multi-million-dollar contract. Who's going to manage that account now? Pilar and her digital marketing charm? I should have felt vindictive, but instead, I felt calm. The decision had been made, and it was the right one. In fact, maybe I should thank Marcos. If it weren't for what he said at the party, I might have kept dragging myself through a company that never valued me. As I drifted to sleep, I thought about the new office, new colleagues, new possibilities, about finally putting into action the ideas I'd shelved for years because of Marcos's conservatism. About making decisions myself instead of just following orders. And the last thought before sleep took me was about Monday. For the first time in a long while, I was actually looking forward to it. On Monday, I woke up before the alarm. It was still dark outside. December mornings are reluctant to begin, hiding behind thick clouds. Normally, on days like this, I could barely force myself out of bed, but today was different. The usual route to the office, every traffic light, every pothole memorized from 5 years of commuting, felt different. It wasn't endless anymore. It had an end. The security guard at the building entrance nodded at me with his usual, "Good morning, Enrica." I smiled more warmly than usual. Who knows, maybe it would be our last time crossing paths. The Build Invest office on the 8th floor greeted me with the hum of computers and the smell of fresh coffee. Maria, our secretary, suddenly raised an eyebrow when she saw I had arrived an hour earlier than usual. "Enrica, early bird today. Marcos isn't in yet." "That's all right, I'll wait," I said calmly, heading to my desk. The sales department gradually filled with people, some yawning and sneaking glances at the clock, others chatting about their weekends. No one mentioned the party, either out of tact or because they hadn't realized I was there. I turned on my computer, sorted through emails, left notes on current projects. Everything had to be in order when I left. "Good morning, colleagues." Pilar's bright voice cut through the office murmur. She walked in wearing a new suit, a stylish pantsuit that flattered her figure. Her hair was in a professional updo, makeup minimal. Getting into the boss role, I thought. She caught my gaze and hesitated for a second but quickly composed herself. "Enrica. Good morning. Didn't expect to see you after Friday." "Why not?" I smiled. "I have an important meeting with Marcos today." Pilar raised an eyebrow, puzzled, but I'd already turned back to my screen. Let her wonder. Others around the office, noticing our brief exchange, started whispering to each other. Of course, they all knew what had happened at the party. I wondered how many had heard Marcos call me useless. Just before 10, the familiar deep voice echoed in the lobby. Marcos appeared in the doorway, looking rumpled and gloomy. From his bloodshot eyes and grayish skin tone, it was clear he hadn't spent the weekend reading Dostoevsky. "Good morning, Marcos." Maria jumped up. "Enrica's been waiting for you an hour now." "Who?" He blinked, as if trying to focus. "Oh, Enrica. Let her wait, I've got a meeting with the new department head." Pilar immediately pulled away from her computer and strode toward his office with a businesslike air. As she passed my desk, she couldn't resist throwing me a triumphant glance. I just nodded back. Poor girl. She has no idea what she's walking into. I had to wait nearly an hour. Finally, Pilar floated out of the office, beaming, holding a stack of papers. She stepped into the middle of the department and cheerfully announced, "Colleagues, starting today, we're implementing a new reporting system. Every morning at 9 o'clock, we'll be holding a daily stand-up." I didn't stay to listen. I headed straight for Marcos's office. I knocked and entered without waiting for a response. He was slouched in his chair, massaging his temples. "Oh, Enrica," he muttered without looking up. "Listen, if this is about Friday, now's not the time. I've got a splitting headache and a ton on my plate." I silently placed the envelope with my resignation letter on his desk. Marcos stared at it, puzzled, then looked up at me. "What's this?" "My resignation. I'm leaving voluntarily." He took a second to process it. Then his expression changed, from disbelief to surprise, and finally to concern. Wait, he sat up straight. You're not seriously quitting over the promotion, are you? Come on, Enrica, you're a grown woman. Business is business. You just need to brush up on some modern methods. It's not about the promotion, Marcos, I said calmly. It's about respect. About professional recognition. I do value you, he exclaimed, throwing up his hands. Who said I don't? You're an irreplaceable employee. Irreplaceable, but useless, I reminded him coolly. Nothing but losses, right? He paled. So he remembered his words from the party. Enrica, that was drunk talk. I said that in the heat of the moment. You shouldn't take it seriously. I don't, I said. I'm just leaving. Where? His eyes narrowed. Don't tell me, to the competition? I shrugged. What does it matter? As you said, I'm just a liability. Marcos jumped to his feet, his face flushing red. No way. Sorry, but I'm not letting you walk away that easily. You've got a contract. That includes a non-compete clause and a 2-week notice. You can withhold the compensation, I replied, prepared for this. As for the notice period, there's no point. The department already has a new head. Isn't that right? I've handed everything off to Pilar. If she can manage. He stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. Gone was the usual condescension in his eyes, now there was something closer to respect. Still, where are you going? To Antonio, I said, watching his face shift. He offered me the head of sales position at his company. Antonio Cardoso? Marcos cursed loudly. That upstart. He doesn't know a damn thing about business. His little company will collapse in 6 months. Well, we'll see about that, I replied calmly. After all, it's my company now too. Marcos sank back into his chair, defeated. Enrica, come on, let's be reasonable. I can reconsider the promotion. Pilar hasn't signed her contract yet. It's too late, Marcos. I gave Antonio my word. And what am I supposed to do about the clients now? He pleaded. They trust you, especially Gabriel, with his shopping mall deal. I allowed myself a small smile. That's no longer my concern. You've got Pilar and her innovative methods now. Speaking of Gabriel, he's old school. Doesn't like his account manager changed without warning. You might want to give him a personal call. Marcos ran a hand through his hair, making it even messier. Enrica, don't do this. Let's talk. I can offer you a promotion, a new role. Goodbye, Marcos, I said, turning to the door. Best of luck with your new department head. When I stepped out, I saw the entire department staring at me. Apparently, my conversation with Marcos had been louder than I thought. Pilar was standing there, clutching a folder to her chest. Her expression was a mix of triumph and anxiety. Enrica is leaving us, I announced, looking her directly in the eye. Congratulations on your new role, Pilar. Just a tip, study the Gabriel contract carefully before tomorrow's meeting. There are some important details. What meeting? Pilar stammered, turning pale. Marcos didn't say anything. He must have forgotten, I smiled. Gabriel is coming tomorrow at 10 to sign an addendum worth $2 million. He's a man of principle, likes clarity. All the documents are in the blue folder on my desk. I saw fear flash in Pilar's eyes. She clearly wasn't ready for that kind of responsibility. Karen came over and squeezed my hand. Good luck, Enrica. Call me once you're settled. I will, I hugged her. Thanks for everything. A murmur swept through the department. Some came over to shake my hand, others averted their eyes. Carlos, our senior manager, quietly asked, Enrica, are there any job openings at your new place? I just gave a mysterious smile in return. I packed up my things into a cardboard box. One last glance around the office, 5 years. Strangely, I felt no sadness, no regret, only a sense of release, as if heavy chains had finally fallen from my shoulders. At the exit, Pilar caught up with me, looking nervous. Enrica, wait. That contract with Gabriel. You're not just going to leave, are you? You'll hand everything over properly, right? I looked at her carefully, so young, ambitious. Maybe she wasn't as bad as I thought. She had simply been in the right place at the right time and seized her opportunity. Would I have acted any differently in her position? All the materials are in the blue folder, Pilar. It has the complete set of documents and my notes. If you have any questions, I paused for a moment, asked Marcos. It's his responsibility now. The elevator chimed softly and the doors opened. I stepped in without looking back. The last thing I saw was Pilar's bewildered face and Marcos rushing out of his office with a phone in hand. Seemed like he was already making desperate attempts to retain clients. As the elevator descended, I felt my lips curling into a smile. A new life lay ahead, without these walls, without constant humiliation, without needing to prove my worth every day. My phone buzzed in my blazer pocket, a message from Antonio. See you by lunch. Your office is ready. Nameplate ordered. As I exited the business center, I noticed with surprise that the snow that had been falling all morning had stopped. A shy December sun peeked through the clouds, as if even the weather approved of my decision. I took a deep breath of the crisp winter air and walked purposefully toward the parking lot. My new life started today. I hadn't even reached Mercury Tower when my phone rang, Marcos. I was about to ignore it, but then decided to answer. Let him squirm. Yes? I said, pointedly curt. Enrica, we need to meet. Marcos sounded unusually frantic. Right now. It's urgent. I already have a meeting scheduled, Marcos. Cancel it. Not a request, a command, as always. Gabriel called. He found out you're leaving and refuses to sign the agreement. He's demanding you personally. I allowed myself a smile. Old Gabriel had always valued personal relationships over corporate formalities. I'd worked with him directly for 3 years. I knew all his quirks and preferences. Hell, I even remembered his grandkids' birthdays. That's no longer my problem. 20 million, Enrica. His tone shifted to pleading. Please, meet me at Brew & Company in half an hour. I promise, it'll be worth your while. Well, maybe it was worth hearing him out. Besides, I wouldn't make it to Antonio's by lunch anyway, traffic. Fine. In 40 minutes, I said, steering the car toward the center. Brew & Company was nearly empty at this hour. Marcos was already at a back table, nervously tapping his fingers. A cup of espresso sat untouched in front of him. When he saw me, he tried to muster a pleasant smile, but it came out as a strained grimace. Enrica, thank you for coming. He stood up, pulling out a chair for me. What can I get you? Company's treating. Just your time, Marcos, I replied as I sat across from him. Today's my first day at my new job. His face twitched. Don't be hasty. Just listen to what I have to offer. The waiter arrived. I ordered an Americano. Once he left, Marcos leaned across the table. I spoke with the board. We're ready to revise our decision. Pilar stays in marketing, and you take over as commercial director. That's a step above department head. Full autonomy, a 50% salary increase, and quarterly bonuses. I stared at him in silence. The board, huh? Not long ago, he'd insisted Pilar's appointment was a collective decision. And what convinced the board to be so generous? I asked dryly. My sudden requalification as competent? Marcos winced. Don't get hung up on words, Enrica. You know you're irreplaceable. These damn clients. The second word got out that you were leaving, the phone hasn't stopped ringing. Gabriel, of Tandilov, even Enrique from Prime Construct called. They're all asking if it's true, and threatening to pull their contracts. He downed his cold espresso in one gulp and grimaced. We'll lose millions if you go, Enrica. Especially to Antonio Cardoso. That weasel's just waiting to scoop up our clients. Antonio's not a weasel, I replied calmly. He's a good leader who values his people. Oh, please. Marcos scoffed. Remember him walking around with that party popper after I fired him? You'll regret this, he mimicked. Childish. And yet, he kept his word, I noted, sipping my coffee. His company already won 3 tenders you only dreamed of. Marcos pursed his lips in irritation. Let's be serious, Enrica. What do you want to stay? Name your price. It's not about money, Marcos. It's about respect. I do respect you. Very much. He reached for my hand, but I pulled it away. So I snapped at the party. Who hasn't? I had too much to drink, and you immediately hand in a resignation. My coffee arrived. I took a sip, gathering my thoughts. For 5 years, I had waited for a conversation like this. I dreamed of a promotion, of having my work acknowledged. And now, finally, I was getting it, but not because of my talent or loyalty. No, it was fear of losing clients. Not respect. Not recognition. Just plain old profit. You must realize your resignation is a blow to the gut. Marcos kept pressing. Think of the team. Who's going to clean up this mess? Pilar? She doesn't know anything about real work. That was just a branding move, and you know it. I raised an eyebrow. Branding? So you never actually intended to give her real authority? And yet, for 5 years, you told me every position matters, that we're a team. Marcos waved his hand impatiently. Enrica, you know how it works. We had to show the investors we're a young, dynamic team. A little shot of youth, that's all. You get it. But the real work, it depends on people like you. Professionals. His voice oozed such blatant flattery that it made me sick. I imagined coming back to that office every day, seeing Marcos's face, listening to his fake compliments, knowing that at the first opportunity, he'd betray me again. No, thanks, I said firmly. I appreciate the offer, Marcos, but I have to decline. His expression turned to stone. You don't understand what you're turning down. Antonio is a pretender. His company won't last. Well, we'll see about that, I replied calmly. As far as I know, Alphabuild is already ranked 3rd among regional developers. And that's without your client base. You're planning to poach our clients, he snapped, eyes narrowing. Need I remind you about the non-compete clause in your contract? I'm not poaching anyone, I replied firmly. But if clients themselves decide to switch contractors, that's their right. And by the way, that clause only applies in the case of termination for cause. I'm leaving voluntarily. Marcos flushed a deep red. Clearly, he didn't expect me to know my rights so well. You'll regret this, he hissed. I'll make sure no one hires you in this field again. And for the first time in years, I laughed, genuinely, freely. All the fear and doubt I had carried for so long vanished like smoke. Marcos, do you really think that after 5 years at Build Invest, anything can scare me? I've seen you fire people the day before their work anniversaries just to avoid paying a bonus. I've seen you make promises and conveniently forget them, steal others' ideas, blame your mistakes on your staff. I shook my head. Enough. I'm done. He stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. His mouth opened, then closed, no words came. Goodbye, Marcos. And don't worry about Gabriel, I'll personally explain to him why continuing the contract with Build Invest is still worthwhile. Consider it a farewell gift. I stood up, pulled on my coat. Thanks for the coffee. Good luck staying afloat. I felt his eyes on my back as I walked out of the cafe, but I didn't turn around, there was no need. That chapter of my life was closed, and I was happy to put a bold period at the end. On the way to Antonio's office, I called Gabriel. He picked up immediately, as if he'd been waiting. Gabriel, good afternoon. It's Enrica. Enrica. His raspy voice warmed. So it's true what I heard, that you're leaving those scoundrels? I smiled. 80-year-old Gabriel was an old-school businessman, tough as nails, but he always treated me like a granddaughter. It's true, Gabriel. I'm joining Alphabuild, working with Antonio. I know the young wolf, he chuckled. Sharp guy, he'll go far. Well then, I guess we'll follow you there. Gabriel, I wouldn't rush that decision, I said gently. You have a long-term contract with Build Invest. Breaking it wouldn't be in your best interest. There was a moment of surprised silence. Well, I'll be, he finally said. You're leaving and still defending them? I'm giving professional advice, I explained. The contract is well written, the penalties are too high. Better to wait out the remaining 8 months and then decide. You were always an honest girl, Enrica, he said with a smile in his voice. All right, I'll follow your advice. But mark my words, the moment that contract ends, I'm switching to Antonio, and only if you manage my projects. Deal, Gabriel. Now go. Blaze your trail. I believe in you. The Mercury Tower was nothing like the cold, rigid offices of Build Invest. Sleek glass and concrete architecture, a bright and airy lobby with live plants and bubbling fountains. At the reception desk, a friendly young woman greeted me. Are you Enrica? Antonio told us you'd be arriving. 15th floor, we'll escort you. A security guard with a badge reading Baltasar called the elevator and accompanied me upstairs. Everything was in sharp contrast to the bureaucratic grind I had grown used to over the past 5 years. When the elevator doors opened on the 15th floor, I saw Antonio waiting in the hallway. Tall, polished, impeccably dressed, no trace of the scruffy guy who once stormed out of Build Invest in protest. Enrica. He stepped forward, shaking my hand firmly. Welcome to the team. Thank you for waiting, I smiled. I was delayed with Marcos. Oh? Antonio raised an eyebrow. Tried to win you back? He offered me the position of commercial director and full autonomy. You turned it down, Antonio said, not a question, but a statement. He smirked. Our Marcos was never one for foresight. He should have made the offer earlier, not when the house was already on fire. Come on, let me show you your office. The Alphabuild office was smaller than Build Invest's, but far more comfortable, light-colored walls, cozy furniture, and potted plants everywhere. The staff were young and energetic, but without that forced enthusiasm Marcos always demanded from us. Here, Antonio said, swinging open the door to a corner office with panoramic windows, this is your domain now. A brand new nameplate gleamed on the door, Enrica Espiso, Commercial Director. Commercial Director? I looked at Antonio in surprise. But we agreed on head of sales. I thought it over and decided your experience and connections deserve more, he said simply. The salary reflects that. And yes, full autonomy, real autonomy, not just lip service. I stepped inside and ran my hand across the smooth desk surface. A computer, an organizer, and a vase of wildflowers, my favorite, were already in place. Thank you for your trust, I said quietly. Thank you for agreeing to join, Antonio replied just as simply. I've been trying to poach you for 3 years. Stop by once you've settled in, I'll introduce you to the team. Meetings at 4. He left me alone. I walked over to the window and looked out at the snowy city below. My phone buzzed, Karen. So, how are you? Marcos is still fuming. Pilar's crying in the bathroom. The whole department's talking about you. I smiled. Everything's great. I'm now commercial director. Karen responded with a barrage of applause emojis. I always knew you'd make it. See you this weekend, you have to tell me everything. Definitely. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes, a deep calm settled inside me. Snow was falling gently outside the window, and from the reception area I could hear soft voices and laughter. A new life, a new chapter, and it promised to be far more exciting than the last. It was just past 3. Still some time before the meeting, so I decided to explore. The new office was almost twice the size of my old cubicle. Instead of suffocating walls, there were glass partitions. Minimalist light wood furniture. A leather chair that offered support, not a sinking feeling. On the desk sat the latest laptop model, not the ancient machines Build Invest doled out once a decade in the name of budget optimization. Opening the drawers, I found neatly arranged stationery, a company-branded planner, and a box of handmade chocolates. Attached was a note. "Welcome to the team. The Alphabuild family." That small gesture touched me more than I expected. At Build Invest, even on birthdays, the best I got was a generic bouquet ordered by the secretary on Marcos's behalf. But here, cherry chocolates, my favorite. How did they know? A knock on the door. A young woman with a neat bob haircut stood in the doorway. "Enrica? I'm Sarah Pavel, your personal assistant." She offered her hand. "Antonio asked me to show you around and introduce you to the team." "Nice to meet you, Sarah." I shook her hand. A personal assistant? Even Marcos didn't have one. "And just call me Enrica." "All right," she smiled. "Where should we start?" "Sales team? They're especially eager to meet you." We stepped out of the office. Alphabuild occupied half the floor and was arranged as an open workspace with separate meeting rooms. No long corridors or closed doors like at Build Invest. Everything was transparent, literally and figuratively. The sales department was located at the center, 10 workstations, each with a computer and headset. As we entered, the employees stood up. "Everyone, this is Enrica Espiso, our new commercial director," Sarah announced. "Hello." I scanned their faces, mostly young, but a few older employees too. "Nice to meet you all. I look forward to working with you." "We've heard all about your achievements at Build Invest," said a tall man in his 40s. "I'm Manuel, head of the department, or rather, I was before you arrived." He smiled warmly. "I hope we'll work well together, Manuel." I offered my hand. "And I'm not here to push anyone out. On the contrary, I'd be glad to rely on your experience." "Fantastic," he shook my hand energetically. "We're just wrapping up the quarterly plan. Would you like to take a look?" "With pleasure, but a bit later. I'd like to meet the whole team first." Sarah continued the tour. We visited the marketing team, accounting, legal, and support. Everywhere, I was greeted with interest and kindness. No fear, no tension around management, something I had grown used to at Build Invest. "And here's our pride and joy." Sarah threw open a wide door. "The break room." I could hardly believe my eyes. At Build Invest, the so-called break room was a glorified broom closet with a tattered couch, a broken water cooler, and an always empty first aid kit. Here, it was a real relaxation space: plush sofas, a gaming console, bookshelves, coffee machine, a fridge stocked with drinks, even a massage chair. "Antonio believes well-rested employees work better," Sarah explained proudly. "We even have quiet hour, 1 to 2 p.m., you can nap in the sleep pods." She pointed to some futuristic-looking pods in the corner. "Impressive," I admitted sincerely. "At Build Invest, you could be fired for napping at work. Here, we fine people for working overtime." Sarah laughed. "Antonio says if someone's always staying late, they're either overburdened or disorganized." It was so different from Marcos's philosophy, where working late was seen as loyalty, that I couldn't help but shake my head. "I can't believe this is the same Antonio who used to work with us at Build Invest," I said. "He was, let's say, passionate." "Oh, he still is." Sarah laughed. "But now he channels that energy productively. He says a company is a living organism, and the health of each cell affects the whole system." We returned to my office, and Sarah helped set up the computer. It turned out Alphabuild used a state-of-the-art CRM system, something I could only dream of back at Build Invest: full client database, contact history, automatic report generation, everything at your fingertips. At 5 we have a meeting on current projects, Sarah said before leaving. But right now, there's a call for you at reception. Someone named Gabriel's asking to speak with you. My eyebrows lifted. Could the old man really be planning to break his contract with Build Invest right away, despite my advice? Put him through, I nodded. Enrica. Gabriel's raspy voice sounded unusually excited. You all settled in? Yes, Gabriel, just getting started. Excellent. Listen, that former boss of yours, what's his name? Marcos? He just called me. Know what he offered? A 20% discount on the whole project. Can you believe it? 5 years, he turned his nose up at any concessions, and now this. I couldn't help smiling. Marcos had never given discounts. Good products don't come cheap, was his favorite saying. Sounds like he's genuinely scared of losing you as a client. I told him straight up, too late, my friend. As soon as the contract ends, I'm moving everything to your team, shopping mall and all the other projects too. But I advised you to wait until the contract expired, I reminded him gently. And I will wait, he chuckled. But why let him know that? Let him sweat a little. Oh, and get this, he even apologized for firing you. I wasn't fired, Gabriel. I resigned. Well, he's telling me it was all a misunderstanding and that they're desperate to get you back. Said they offered you some fancy title, commercial conductor or something? Director, I corrected, barely holding back laughter. That's it. Anyway, I told him I'd think about it. Let him dance a bit. And I also told him that if I hear one bad word about you from that company, I'll cut all ties immediately, pass that on to your new boss. You know I've got more than just this one project. Thank you, Gabriel, I said, genuinely touched. Sweetheart, his voice took on a paternal warmth, business is built on trust, and I never trusted your Marcos. I only worked with them because you were there. Figured, if someone like you was still sticking around, maybe the place wasn't a total loss. But now. He paused meaningfully. Anyway, tell Antonio old Gabriel hasn't forgotten how he once called out a sloppy project honestly and didn't back down from Marcos. I respect people like that. By 4 o'clock, I had already reviewed the core documents Manuel had sent over and had a general overview of the company's operations. Alphabuild was young but fast-growing, 3 major projects underway, 5 in negotiation, and a dozen in the pipeline. A clear structure, transparent financials, and what impressed me most, their client policy was built on honesty and openness. At 3:45, Antonio poked his head into my office. How are you settling in? Any questions? Still getting my bearings, I smiled. But I have to admit, you run a tight ship. We run a tight ship, he corrected. You're part of the team now. Let's head to the meeting. The conference room was equipped with the latest technology, a wall-sized screen, ergonomic chairs, a video conferencing system for remote employees. Around the oval table sat about 10 department heads. Everyone stood up as I entered. Colleagues, Antonio began, this is our new commercial director, Enrica. I believe most of you have already met her, but for those who haven't, Enrica is a top-tier professional with extensive experience. Her mission is to elevate our sales strategy and expand our client base. I felt my cheeks flush. At Build Invest, Marcos never praised anyone publicly, afraid it would go to their heads. Thank you for the warm welcome, I said, meeting everyone's eyes. I'll do my best to earn your trust. And please, don't hesitate to point out any mistakes or share your ideas. I'm new here and have a lot to learn. Antonio nodded approvingly and moved on to the agenda. The meeting was surprisingly efficient, no fluff, only clear topics and actionable items. Each manager gave concise updates. No one tried to deflect blame or bury issues, so different from the cover-your-back culture I was used to. Now, let's talk strategy for next quarter, Antonio said, pulling up a graph on the screen. As you can see, we've exceeded targets in 2 out of 3 areas. The third, industrial construction, is lagging. We need new approaches here. He turned to me. Enrica, do you have experience with industrial projects? Yes, I handled 3 such projects at Build Invest, I nodded. One of them was the renovation of the Steel Core Industries factory. I believe they're planning a second phase right about now. Steel Core Industries? Antonio's eyebrows shot up. That's one of the biggest projects in the industry. Exactly, I smiled. I personally negotiated with their leadership. The room fell silent for a moment. Then Manuel gave a low whistle of admiration. So that's why Marcos was willing to do anything to keep you. Not only that, I said, opening my laptop. I have a few thoughts about our industrial sector strategy, if I may. Antonio gestured for me to go on. I brought up a presentation I had drafted in the past hour. Right now, there's a trend toward modernization of industrial facilities. Many factories and plants are 40 to 50 years old. Their equipment is outdated, the buildings need renovation, but shutting down operations entirely would mean major financial losses. I suggest we develop a special offer for these clients, phased reconstruction without halting core production lines. As I spoke, the faces around the table grew more animated. Questions flew, ideas were exchanged. No one was checking the time or yawning behind their hands, unlike the endless meetings at Build Invest. Everyone was engaged. Excellent idea. Antonio concluded when I finished. Form a task group and present a detailed plan by the end of the week. The budget is already approved. I couldn't believe my ears. At Build Invest, getting even the simplest initiative approved could take weeks, sometimes months. Endless sign-offs, approvals, layers of bureaucracy. Here, instant decision. Full trust. After the meeting, several colleagues approached me to discuss the upcoming project. Their enthusiasm was contagious. At Build Invest, new ideas were met with suspicion. Why change anything if it still works? Here, innovation was welcomed. Once everyone had left, only Antonio and I remained in the conference room. You know, he said, leaning back in his chair, I spent 3 years trying to lure you away from Build Invest. I saw your potential, but you never made the move. What changed? I realized I deserved better, I replied simply. And that loyalty should go both ways. He nodded, understanding. You really impressed the team. They're all excited to work with you. I'm impressed too, I admitted. Your approach to leadership is refreshing. Our approach, he corrected with a smile. And yes, I experimented a lot before I found a model that worked. Remember what I was like at Build Invest? Impulsive. Impatient. But principled, I added. You were the only one who dared to tell Marcos the truth about those defective materials. And I paid the price, he chuckled. But honestly, best thing that ever happened to me. Otherwise, I'd still be in his shadow, following orders and killing my own ideas. I nodded thoughtfully. Maybe getting out of Build Invest would be the best thing to ever happen to me too, a fresh start. Do you have plans tonight? Antonio asked suddenly. No, I said, surprised by the change of topic. Perfect. Let's celebrate your first day. I've booked a table for 7. We can also discuss the industrial strategy over dinner. In any other situation, I might have been suspicious. Marcos also liked inviting female staff to business dinners that ended with not-so-businesslike proposals. But Antonio's expression held only sincere respect. Gladly, I smiled. I'll just stop by home to change. Of course, he nodded. I'll pick you up at 6:30? As I left Alphabuild's office at the end of the day, I was surprised to realize, for the first time in ages, I felt truly happy. Not just satisfied with a job well done, happy. Dinner with Antonio lay ahead. New projects. New opportunities. A new life where I was valued not for my looks or age, but for my expertise and experience. And somehow, I just knew this was only the beginning. The next 2 weeks flew by in a blur. I dove headfirst into the work, meeting clients, reviewing projects, building plans. Antonio gave me full freedom, and it felt exhilarating. For the first time in years, I wasn't just carrying out orders, I was realizing my potential. I tried not to think about build invest. The new life demanded all my focus. That's why I was so surprised when Karen called me on Friday evening. "Enrica, you won't believe what's going on," she burst out, skipping any pleasantries. "I had to tell you." "What happened?" I smiled, imagining Karen, normally so composed at work, waving her arms in excitement. "Gabriel canceled the contract. Marcos is losing his mind. Can you believe it? They were supposed to sign the addendum yesterday, and Gabriel just didn't show up. He sent a formal termination notice instead, citing a major breach of contract." I frowned. But I told him to wait until the contract ended naturally. "Exactly." Karen snorted. "But do you think Marcos took care of that?" Guess what happened? Pilar screwed up. She went to the site with the documents you left behind, but she didn't bother checking them. And there was a special condition. Gabriel always insisted on German fittings, remember? Well, the new specs listed Chinese ones. Budget cuts, apparently. When Gabriel noticed the switch, he flipped. Rumor has it he even banged his cane on the table. Oh no. I covered my face with my hand. Gabriel was meticulous about quality. I always made sure only the best materials were used on his projects. So what now? Marcos is furious. He screamed at Pilar so hard the glass was shaking. She cried all morning, then went on sick leave. The legal team says Gabriel's completely within his rights. There's no case. They won't owe him penalties, but that $2 million project? Gone. I felt a pang of guilt. Maybe I should have given Pilar a more thorough handover. But I quickly shook off the thought. It wasn't my responsibility anymore. Besides, I had left all the necessary documents. And that's not all. Karen continued, barely concealing her glee. Remember Diego Mestre? He also refused to renew his contract. Said he only wants to work with you and has already signed with Alphabuild. How do you know that? I hadn't even had a chance to reach out to Diego yet. Oh, Enrica, you have no idea, we've got full-on spy drama going on here. Marcos called in Dorian from security and ordered him to monitor all Alphabuild's negotiations. But Piotr's always liked you, he tipped me off. Seriously? I shook my head. Marcos's paranoia had hit new heights. Everything's upside down here. Karen lowered her voice to a whisper. Half the sales team has already sent out resumes. Dima's definitely planning to join you. He asked me about the working conditions there. Even Maria, Marcos's secretary, is looking for a new job. Says it's unbearable now. He snaps at everyone. And how's Pilar managing the department? She's not. Karen scoffed. Turns out, she knows nothing about construction. Her whole digital marketing plan boiled down to launching a search ad campaign, which ate up the entire quarterly budget, with 0 results. These projects don't sell online, you know that. I nodded, even though Karen couldn't see me. She was right. In our industry, it was all about personal relationships, reputation, and referrals. No amount of paid advertising could replace a client's trust. And there's more. Karen's voice turned conspiratorial. Head office sent auditors, we're under review. Financials have apparently tanked. Marcos has been summoned twice in the past 2 weeks. That's fast. I couldn't hide my surprise. It's not just because of you, of course. There were plenty of problems piling up, but your departure was the last straw. People see the ship sinking and start looking for lifeboats. I sighed. Despite everything, I still felt for the people I'd worked with for 5 years. You know what's strange? Karen went on. Now Marcos only says good things about you. Enrica is a top-level professional, a huge loss to the company. Like that whole party disaster never happened. I guess he's finally seen the light. I couldn't help smirking. Sure. He saw the light when the fire started. By the way, a lot of people see you as a hero now, like the only one who had the guts to stand up to Marcos. The girls from accounting even toasted to you last Friday. That was unexpected and genuinely touching. I hadn't thought my departure would make such an impact. Come on, Karen, don't exaggerate. It was just a matter of timing. No, it wasn't, she insisted. You inspired us all. Do you know how many years we've put up with Marcos's tantrums, arrogance, and double standards? You showed us there's another way, that we don't have to suffer humiliation just to keep a job. I didn't know what to say. It was strange to realize that my personal decision could have such a ripple effect on others. Anyway, how are things on your end? Karen changed the subject. Are you settling in? More than that, I smiled, thinking back on the past 2 weeks. I never thought work could bring so much joy, no politics, no bureaucracy, no constant inspections. Everyone's focused on the results, not their egos. And how's Antonio as a boss? Karen's voice turned teasing. Rumor has it there's a little office romance brewing. What? I nearly choked on my tea. Who told you that? Marco said it at a meeting, that you joined Antonio not for money, but for personal reasons. Claimed the two of you have had a thing for a while, and that's why you left. I rolled my eyes. Of course Marcos couldn't just admit he failed to value a good employee. He had to invent some scandal. That's nonsense. My relationship with Antonio is strictly professional. But you do go out together outside of work? Karen pressed. Someone saw you at a restaurant. It was a business dinner, I snapped, feeling irritation creep in, to discuss strategy and the business plan. Okay, don't get mad. Karen laughed. I was just teasing. Still, Antonio is quite the catch, successful, classy, no bad habits, and single. Karen. Fine, I'll shut up, she laughed again. But if anything does happen, I'll be thrilled for you. You deserve happiness in every part of your life. We chatted a bit more, and I promised to meet her over the weekend. After the call, I stared out the window of my new office. The news from Build Invest stirred mixed feelings. On one hand, a sense of vindication watching Marcos reap what he had sown. On the other, sympathy for the team, now caught in the fallout. I was deep in thought when Antonio walked in without knocking, beaming. Enrica, I have fantastic news, he said. We won the tender for the steel core industries renovation. Beat out 3 competitors, including your former company. Seriously? I stood up from my desk. But how? Marcos was convinced that contract was in the bag. Well, he shouldn't have let valuable people slip away. Antonio said with a mischievous wink. The Steel Core Industries representatives asked directly if it was true that you now work with us. When I confirmed, they said it was the deciding factor. You left a lasting impression during the last project. I couldn't help but smile. That had been my first major project at Build Invest, and I had poured my soul into it, literally spending nights on site, overseeing every little detail. Glad to see you're happy about it, Antonio said as he perched on the edge of my desk. I was worried it might upset you, because of your former colleagues. It does feel a bit strange, I admitted. I gave that company 5 years, after all. But this is business, nothing personal. Exactly, he nodded. By the way, Marcos called me today. I raised my eyebrows. What did he want? Take a wild guess. Antonio smirked. First, he threatened legal action for poaching staff. Then he tried to suggest we settle things like gentlemen and divide up clients. And finally, he started asking how much I pay you, hinting he's willing to top any offer. And what did you tell him? That you're a grown woman who knows her worth and chooses where and with whom to work. That it's not about the money, but the work environment and how people are treated. I smiled with gratitude. That was exactly what I tried to explain to Marcos, but he'd never understood. And the best part, Antonio continued, was when he suddenly started complaining that everything's falling apart. That clients are leaving, and he might get removed from his position. Can you imagine? Marcos, the embodiment of smug confidence, pouring his heart out to a competitor. I didn't even know how to react. He's desperate, I said thoughtfully. Karen just called. She told me what's going on. Gabriel canceled his contract, Avtandilov refused to renew, and the sales department is practically paralyzed. So what, you think I should feel guilty for recruiting his best employee? Antonio raised his hands. Sorry, but this is business. He's the one who failed to appreciate you. Completely agree. I nodded. It's just strange how fast it all crumbled, as if the entire system collapsed without me. It did, Antonio said seriously. There are people who become the backbone of a company. They might not hold the highest positions, but they hold everything together. Everyone knows who to go to for a solution, who won't let them down. Those people are irreplaceable, no matter what they say. You were that person at Build Invest, and Marcos realized it too late. There was bitter truth in his words. How many times had I stayed late, fixing messes caused by others? How often had I taken responsibility for mistakes that weren't mine? How many times had I shielded management from client backlash? Maybe things will work out for them, I said, more out of politeness than belief. Doubt it, Antonio shook his head. From what I hear, Marcos has lost the trust of both the board and his team. It's over, just a matter of time. My phone rang. Sarah informed me that a representative from Steel Core Industries had arrived to sign the contract. I'm coming, I said, turning to Antonio. Duty calls? Exactly. He smiled. Life goes on, Enrica. And we've got big plans ahead, and we're going to make them happen, together. As I headed down to the conference room, I couldn't help but think how ironic life could be. Just 2 weeks ago, I had been ready to beg Marcos for a promotion, happy for any recognition. Today, I was commercial director at a successful company, handling multi-million-dollar contracts, while my former boss was calling my new one, trying to find out how much he needed to offer to win me back. Life is truly unpredictable. Sometimes all it takes is one bold step into the unknown, and everything changes for the better. In the conference room, I was greeted by Rufino Cancio, Steel Core Industries' technical director. A burly man in his 60s with a thick mustache and the sharp gaze of an old-school engineer. Enrica, he said, rising to meet me, good to see you in your new role. The moment I heard you joined Alphabuild, I told my team, we're changing contractors. Working with you is a pleasure, always straight to the point, none of that flashy nonsense. I shook his strong, calloused hand. Thank you for the trust, Rufino. We'll do our best to earn it. No doubt you will, he winked. So, how's Marcos doing? Throwing a fit when you left? There were moments, I replied diplomatically. I can imagine, he snorted. He's a real piece of work. All right, he rubbed his hands, shall we get down to business? Is the contract ready? I opened the folder I had carefully prepared. For the next hour, we discussed project details, budgets, timelines. Rufino asked precise technical questions, and I answered with full confidence, clearly demonstrating my expertise. At the end, he nodded in approval. We definitely made the right call. It's much easier working with someone who knows their stuff. After the contract was signed and Rufino had left, satisfied, I sat for a moment in the empty conference room. A deep sense of fulfillment washed over me. For the first time in a long while, I truly felt I was where I belonged. The pieces had finally fallen into place. And while my departure might have been a disaster for Build Invest, for me, it marked the beginning of a much happier chapter. The phone rang again. This time, it was an unknown number. Enrica Espiso, a cautious male voice came through the receiver. Yes, this is she. My name is Paolo. I'm a member of the board of directors at Build Invest. We need to meet, it's very important. My eyebrows rose in surprise. The board had never contacted regular staff directly, only through Marcos. What on earth was going on? What is it regarding? I'd prefer to discuss it in person. Let's just say, the company is at a crossroads, and we need your counsel. The intrigue deepened. I agreed to meet in a neutral location, a restaurant not far from the office. Whatever Paolo wanted to say, it promised to be interesting. The restaurant greeted me with soft lighting and an old-world atmosphere. A doorman in uniform opened the door, and a maitre d' escorted me to a reserved table. I arrived 10 minutes early, a habit ingrained by years of professional meetings. Paolo didn't make me wait long, a tall, silver-haired man in his 60s, impeccably dressed with a measured, observant gaze. I recognized him only from portraits in Build Invest's head office corridors. The board almost never lowered itself to dealing with regular employees. Enrica, he said, shaking my hand firmly. Thank you for agreeing to meet, especially under the circumstances of your departure. I'm curious myself, I smiled. To be honest, I was surprised by your call. We placed our order, and while the waiter filled our glasses, Paolo studied me carefully, as though evaluating. Finally, once we were alone, he spoke. I'll be frank with you. Build Invest is going through a difficult time. In the last 2 weeks, we've lost 3 major contracts, including the Steel Core Industries project. Congratulations, by the way, he added with a faint smile. I hear Alphabuild won the tender largely thanks to you. Business is business, I said with a shrug, sipping my wine. Exactly, he nodded. And right now, our business is struggling. The board convened an emergency session. We reviewed the situation and concluded that your departure was the catalyst for a crisis that had been brewing for a long time. I was just head of sales, or rather, used to be, I corrected. You were much more than that, Enrica, he said seriously. It's clear now. Clients valued you, your colleagues respected you. You were the glue holding the whole system together. Unfortunately, Marcos failed to recognize that in time. I watched him silently, waiting. Paolo took a sip of wine and continued. Yesterday, the board voted to remove Marcos from his position as CEO of Build Invest. I nearly choked. Really, was all I managed. Yes, he nodded. Too many mistakes, too many losses, both reputational and financial. I understand this might feel like justice delayed, but I assure you, this decision wasn't personal. It was strictly business. I understand, I said, though inside I felt an unexpected sense of satisfaction. Not gloating, just a sense that life does eventually put things in their proper place. And we would like to offer you his position. Now I really choked. After a moment, I cleared my throat and stared at him, trying to gauge if he was joking. Are you serious? Completely, he said, pulling a folder from his briefcase. This is our preliminary offer, responsibilities, salary, bonuses, benefits package. Everything is negotiable, of course. But I'll say up front, we're ready to offer terms significantly better than what Alphabuild provides. I took the folder without opening it. My mind was in chaos. CEO of Build Invest, a position I never dreamed of, never dared imagine I could attain, especially under Marcos. I don't know what to say, I admitted. Don't say anything just yet, Paolo said gently. Review the offer, take your time. We understand we were unfair to you, and this is our attempt to make it right. Build Invest is a company with a 20-year legacy, strong market presence, and enormous potential. Yes, we're in crisis, but with the right leadership. He trailed off, but the meaning was clear. They wanted me to pull the company out of the pit it had fallen into, return and fix everything. What about Marcos? I asked. Does he know about your offer? A shadow passed over Paolo's face. No. He'll be officially informed of his dismissal tomorrow. But I'd like our conversation to remain confidential until you've made a decision. I nodded, my hand unconsciously stroking the folder. My thoughts were tangled. A few weeks ago, I would have jumped at this opportunity without hesitation. But now, I need time to think, I said at last. And I have to speak with my current employer. I can't just walk away from Antonio. He believed in me, gave me a chance. Of course, Paolo nodded, understanding. Business demands integrity. We're willing to wait for your decision until Monday. If it's yes, we can introduce you officially to the team on Tuesday. The rest of the dinner was spent discussing the company's situation, clients, projects. I asked pointed questions, and Paolo answered honestly, without sugarcoating. The crisis was deeper than I'd imagined. At one point, I caught myself already mentally solving Build Invest's problems, as if I were already in charge. As we parted outside the restaurant, he shook my hand once more. I truly hope for a positive answer, Enrica. The team would be happy to have you back. I'll call you on Monday, I promised. All the way home, I couldn't shake the strange feeling that this wasn't real. The events of the past few weeks felt like the plot of a novel or a film. A regular employee, humiliated at a corporate party, suddenly becomes so valuable that two companies fight over her, offering leadership roles and staggering salaries. At home, I opened the folder Paolo had given me. The numbers made me whistle. The proposed salary was 3 times what I'd earned at Build Invest as head of sales and 1.5 times more than my current compensation at Alphabuild. Plus, bonuses, stock options, a company car, expanded medical insurance. The temptation was real, to return to the place I had left, head held high, this time as CEO. To sit in Marcos's office. To finally fix everything he had ruined with his poor leadership. But something held me back. I thought about those 5 years at Build Invest, the constant emergencies, the office politics, the dirty competitive tricks. The atmosphere, tense, anxious, toxic. That company culture had been shaped for years under Marcos. It wouldn't magically change just because someone new stepped into his shoes. Then I thought about Alphabuild. The glass walls instead of stuffy corridors. The team that welcomed me with open arms. The trust Antonio had shown me from day one. The healthy environment where work felt fulfilling, not draining. I closed the folder and set it aside. Deep down, I think my decision had already been made. But I wanted to sleep on it, weigh everything over the weekend before giving my final answer. On Monday, I arrived at Alphabuild earlier than usual. I needed to talk to Antonio before the day officially began. He was already in, light shone from his office. May I? I knocked on the open door. Enrica, he looked up from his paperwork. Come in. You're early today. We need to talk. I sat across from him. On Friday, a member of Build Invest's board contacted me. They're removing Marcos and offered me the CEO position. Antonio leaned back, his expression unreadable. I see. And have you made a decision? I wanted to talk to you first, I said honestly. It's a serious offer, and I didn't want to decide without speaking to you. You're an adult, Enrica, he said with a shrug, but I could see the tension in his jaw. Of course, the decision is yours. If you feel that becoming Build Invest's CEO is a step forward, I'll understand. We can't offer you a comparable title, we already have a CEO, he added with a faint smile. But if it's about money, we can revisit your terms. It's not about money, I shook my head. It never was. It's about fulfillment, about doing meaningful work, about the impact you leave behind. He watched me carefully, waiting. I turned them down, I finally said. I called Paolo this morning and told him I'm staying with Alphabuild. Antonio exhaled, and I realized he'd been holding his breath this whole time. I can't say I'm not relieved, he smiled, this time genuinely. But why? That's a massive opportunity, CEO of a major company. It's what most people only dream of. I thought about it for a long time, I said, leaning back. Weighed all the pros and cons. And I realized I don't want to go back to that environment. I don't want to waste energy fixing a rotten corporate culture, cleaning up someone else's messes, constantly battling people stuck in the old ways. Was I ever truly happy at Build Invest in those 5 years? No. But here, these 3 weeks at Alphabuild, I wake up wanting to come to work. I leave every day with a sense of accomplishment, not with the feeling that I'm dragging a burden someone else should be carrying. Antonio nodded in understanding. Besides, I continued, they don't want me to lead, they want me to fix. Bring back the clients, calm the staff, reestablish order. Basically, do what I've already done for 5 years, just with a fancier title and a bigger paycheck. I'm done putting out fires. I want to build, not repair. I want to move forward, not keep glancing over my shoulder. A wise decision, Antonio said with a smile. Though I'll admit, I was worried. You're a key part of this team, Enrica. And not just because of the clients you brought in or the deals you closed. You brought, how can I put it, energy. Experience. Calm. Confidence. I felt a warm flush rise to my cheeks. Thank you for your trust, I said sincerely. You can't buy that, no matter how much they offer. The rest of the day passed in the usual rhythm, meetings, calls, paperwork. That evening, as the office emptied, I stayed late to finish a presentation for tomorrow's investor meeting. My phone rang suddenly, an unfamiliar Moscow number. Enrica Espiso, I answered. Hello, came a familiar voice. Marcos? Is this a good time to talk? I'm listening, I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. He hesitated, and that alone was so unlike the always confident Marcos that it made me sit up. I'd like to meet in person. It's important. For what purpose? I asked directly. There's something we need to talk about, he replied evasively. I can come to your office, or we can meet somewhere neutral, if that's more comfortable for you. I paused. Part of me had no desire to see my former boss ever again. But another part was curious, what could possibly be so important? Besides, now that I had made my final decision, there was nothing left to fear. All right, I finally said. 1 hour from now, at the cafe. I'll be there, he replied shortly and hung up. I arrived at the cafe exactly on time. Marcos was already there, seated at the same table where I'd met with Paolo just a few days earlier. Funny coincidence. As he stood up to greet me, I almost gasped in surprise. In just 3 weeks, Marcos had changed almost beyond recognition. His cheeks were sunken, dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his once perfectly groomed hair was now sparse and disheveled. Even his usually impeccable suit looked rumpled. Enrica, he said, extending a limp handshake. Thank you for agreeing to meet. What happened, Marcos? I sat down across from him. You don't look well. Yeah, he said with a bitter smile. These last few weeks have been rough. The waiter brought menus, but Marcos waved his off. Just coffee. A double espresso. I ordered mine as well. Once the waiter left, Marcos leaned slightly across the table. You've probably heard I was removed from my position? I have, I replied cautiously. It was made official this morning, he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. In front of the whole staff. You know what hurt the most? No one looked sorry. They just stood there with blank faces. I could swear someone even smiled. I stayed silent. What could I say? I built this company over 20 years, he continued. From the ground up, with my own hands. And now it's being taken from me. By the board of directors I handpicked, people I brought in myself. Business is business, I echoed the phrase he'd once loved to use when letting people go. He gave a hollow chuckle. Yeah. You're right. I used to say that too. Now I know what it feels like to be on the other side. Our drinks arrived. Marcos downed his espresso in one go and grimaced. Do you know what Paulo told me? He said I built a great company, but I was a terrible leader. That I failed to keep my key people and clients. That I created a toxic environment no one wanted to work in. He shook his head. And the worst part? I think he's right. I looked carefully at the broken man in front of me. Gone was the arrogant, condescending Marcos. Now he was just a tired, frightened man who had lost everything he held dear. Enrica, he said quietly, calling me by my first name for the first time without formality. I know they offered you my position. I raised my eyebrows in surprise. How do you know? I still have a few informants in the company. He gave a faint smile. Don't worry, I'm not here to ask you to turn it down. On the contrary, I want to ask you to accept it. Now I was truly stunned. You want me to take your job? Yes, he nodded sincerely. If someone has to sit in my chair, I'd rather it be you than some hotshot MBA who'll destroy everything I built. You know the company inside and out. You're loyal to the clients. You care about the employees. He paused, searching for words. You're a better leader than I ever was. A better person, too. I just realized it too late. I said nothing, unsure how to respond to such an unexpected confession. I never thought I'd hear Marcos say someone else was better than him. I declined, I finally said. I called Paulo this morning and told him I'm staying with Alphabuild. Marcos stared at me, visibly surprised. But why? It's the perfect opportunity. He didn't finish the sentence, but I knew what he meant. To get revenge. To switch roles. To take his chair, his power, his company. Exactly, I said calmly. That's why. I don't want revenge, Marcos. I don't want to clean up someone else's mess. I don't want to spend my life trying to prove my worth to people who never saw it. At Alphabuild, they value me for who I am, not for the title I might hold. He looked at me for a long time, as if seeing me clearly for the first time. Then he said quietly, You're wiser than I am, Enrica. Much wiser. We sat in silence. Outside, a light rain had begun to fall. The lights of evening Moscow reflected off the slick pavement. What will you do now? I asked. Marcos shrugged. I don't know. Starting over at my age, who would hire me with a reputation like this? Maybe I'll go to my dacha, grow tomatoes. I've always dreamed of it, just never had the time. He gave a faint, wistful smile. You're a talented man, Marcos, I said, surprising even myself. You built a successful company from nothing. Somewhere along the way, you just lost your direction. You forgot that business is about people, not capital, not contacts. He nodded slowly, thoughtfully. You might be right. You know, when I first started, I had a dream, not just to make money, but to create something meaningful. A company where people would love to work. Where everyone would feel like part of something bigger. But then came the first success, the first big profits, and I lost focus. I started chasing numbers, not people. It's not too late to return to that dream, I said gently. Maybe not at Build Invest, but somewhere else. He looked up at me in surprise, then slowly nodded. Maybe you're right. Maybe. We sat for nearly another hour, talking about the company, the projects, the people. Marcos spoke of Build Invest with a warmth and insight I had never seen in him before. It was as if, having lost the company, he was finally able to see its true value, not in figures or reports, but in people and ideas. As we said goodbye at the restaurant door, he extended his hand to me. Thank you, Enrica. For agreeing to meet, for speaking honestly, and for... He hesitated, for opening my eyes, even if it's a little late. It's never too late to start over, I said, shaking his hand. Good luck, Marcos. And to you, he nodded. Though it seems luck has already smiled on you. I got home late that evening. The unusual encounter with Marcos left a strange aftertaste, not gloating, not pity, but something closer to understanding. The man who once embodied everything I despised in corporate culture, arrogance, ruthlessness, duplicity, had revealed himself to be just a human being with fears, flaws, and regrets. A man who had lost his way, but maybe, just maybe, was now finding a new one. My phone buzzed with a message. It was Antonio. How did it go? Better than I expected, I replied. Life put everything in its place. Glad to hear. See you tomorrow. I smiled and set my phone aside. Standing by the window, I looked out over the city at night. Somewhere out there stood Build Invest's glass tower, a company that had once been my second home. A company I had torn myself away from painfully and now looked upon with a touch of no steel core industries Gia, but no regret. Life had indeed put everything in its place. Leaving Build Invest hadn't been the end, it had been the beginning. The beginning of a new chapter where I could finally be myself. No longer reshaping myself to meet others' expectations. No longer having to prove my worth. No longer sacrificing my principles for the illusion of stability. A month later, Karen called with news. Build Invest had a new CEO, a young business school graduate with ambitious restructuring plans. Many employees had left, unwilling to work under the new regime. Marcos, as it turned out, really had moved to the countryside and was now building small private homes, this time for himself, not for quarterly reports. And Pilar, surprisingly, had landed a job at a major marketing agency where her talents were finally recognized and put to good use. As for me, I was exactly where I belonged. Alphabuild was growing steadily, expanding its market share each month. Antonio and I had become an excellent team, his energy and vision balanced perfectly with my experience and composure. Former Build Invest clients were coming over one by one, not because of my connections, but because of the reputation we had built together as a trustworthy, competent contractor. Sometimes, when I passed Build Invest's building, I'd catch myself wondering, what if that night at the corporate party had gone differently? What if Marcos had recognized my contribution, promoted me, acknowledged my work? Would I still be there, stuck in a toxic atmosphere, clinging to stability and false loyalty? I would never have discovered what I was truly capable of. And every time, I came to the same conclusion. What happened was the best thing that could have happened to me. Sometimes we need a hard push to leave our comfort zone, only to discover that true comfort is being true to ourselves and our values, not to others' expectations. Sometimes we need to go through humiliation in order to reclaim our dignity. Sometimes we have to lose what's familiar to find what's real. And above all, it's never too late to start over. Even if it feels like all bridges have been burned, there's always another shore, another path. You just have to take that first step.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.